All right. So, hi, Caspian. I'm excited to chat
Hello.
today. Will you quickly just introduce yourself for anyone watching?
Yes, my name is Caspian Lewke. I am a former SDR turned associate sales engineer at Gong, and I'm very excited to be here today with you, Katie. So thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. So, let's dive in. I want you to tell me a bit about how you've used Sendoso at Gong and the success that you've
Yeah,
seen.
absolutely. Well, firstly, let me just say that I am a huge Sendoso fan. Um, I had some of my friends give me like fun nicknames because of how many gifts I would send. And so I would say that Sendoso was a huge part of my experience as an SDR. I have no problem sharing that April of last year, which was my first month off of ramp, I unfortunately missed quota, and I missed quota by one meeting, which of course it's kind of like losing a basketball game by 2 points. You begin to think like, could I have done XYZ thing differently, right? If you lose by a lot, if you miss quota by a long shot, it doesn't make it better, but there's less what ifs, or I imagine so. All of that to be said, when I missed quota, it prompted me to think, hey, what are some more creative ways that I can leverage my unique personality and things I already enjoy doing, which for me is giving gifts like in my personal life. And how can I kind of dial that into my professional life? So that's when I really leaned in hard to strategic gift giving and Sendoso in my prospecting approach. And a lot of my colleagues wound up doing the same and saw similar success. So I will say Sendoso is huge at Gong. I am a huge Sendoso fan, and again, just cannot emphasize how little I would have hit quota without Sendoso. So it was a drastic game changer for me.
So interesting. And, you have a play specifically around books and sending
Yep,
books to stand out. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
absolutely. And I know you're thinking books, that's like the worst gift ever. At least I held that opinion probably for like the first 20 years of my life, right? I wouldn't have described myself as a huge reader growing up. However, what I love about books as a gift in B2B and business settings is number one, they cover a variety of topics. So whether someone loves Dolphins, the animal, or the Miami Dolphins, the football team, or I don't know, making dolphin cookies, you can probably find a book that covers some elements of that interest, right? So super widespread coverage. Number two, they're relatively inexpensive. It can be tempting to want, if I had unlimited budget, I would send each of my prospects a yacht or something like that, right? But budget is real. And so it's important to find an effective and compelling gift that doesn't break the bank. And that's where I think books tend to be really effective because some are under $10, some, maybe are like 15, but I would say average is maybe right around 10, $12 per book. So it covers a lot of topics, is inexpensive, and finally is what I would describe as a um, it's an easy way to stand out because it's relatively inoffensive. Like you're not, sometimes you might want to send a prospect a very funny gift and those might land, which, I am all for taking risks and leaning into the creative aspect. But generally speaking, a lot of executives value reading or may at least think of themselves as avid readers. So sending them something that they find intriguing and allows them to dive into a hobby of theirs is kind of like a win-win-win. So that's what was really compelling for me about books. But it took me a while to understand how relevant books could be across the board because I experimented with a lot of different gifts, which I'm happy to share more on.
Yeah, this is awesome. And I'm curious, when you're talking about maybe what someone is interested in, right? And how you choose a specific book. How did you
Yep.
go about that in your process as an SDR?
Yeah. Really good question. To me, there were three tiers of personalization that I would think about when gifting someone. And it goes from most personalized to least personalized. So, at a really simple level, I called it gold tier, silver tier, bronze tier of personalization. And that was just to keep myself honest to understand how what I'll call categorically personalized a gift was. So, gold tier is a gift that I feel is highly personalized to that prospect. And great places to find what I'll call gold tier information is in someone's LinkedIn bio, right? Sometimes people share a lot there. They say, when I'm not leading a sales team, I love hiking in the Alps with my family, right? I know right off the bat, hiking book could be great. Similar places for gold tier information is in the activities and societies section under someone's university. Now, I will call out, because this is important, though I love Sales Nav and I think it's a great way to prospect, if you are on someone's individual profile in Sales Navigator, it hides the activities and societies section from, if you're looking at their university, it will not show their activities and societies. So you actually need to be on their true, what I'll call their like LinkedIn.com page. Just a small item I'd like to call out because that is important. When you're looking at activities and societies, you can see someone played, maybe a sport in college or was really, again, maybe part of an environmental society or something that meant a lot to them. Similarly, that's a great place where you can say, oh, they play basketball. I'm going to send them this, like the joy of basketball book, whatever the case may be. And a lot of sports allow for simple metaphors for whatever your company's value prop is. So that's where I would say gold tier information can be really helpful. But of course, not everyone shares really personal information about themselves. So what do you do in those situations? For me, that's where I think about what I call silver tier gifts, where it is still personalized, but maybe not to something that you're truly passionate about. But for me, I would look at the influencers, or they are now called top voices that people follow on LinkedIn. And you'll notice, when you look at enough executives' profiles, there's kind of like the common perpetrators, right? Simon Sinek, Brene Brown, Tony Robbins, Richard Branson. And I will say 98% of top voices or influencers have written a book. So if you send someone a book written by an influencer that they follow, it comes across as incredibly personalized. The majority of the meetings that I got were from what I call silver tier gifts, because again, not everyone has super personal information that they share, but I would say that, rough estimate, 85% of executives follow some sort of top voice or influencer on LinkedIn. So it's a great way to appear very personalized when you really can do that at scale, right? You can just choose a different influencer. All of that to be said, let's say they don't have really personalized information, so you can't do gold tier. They don't follow any influencers. So you're feeling like you're grasping at straws. This is where what I call bronze tier gifting strategy comes into play. We've spoken about who they follow. It's also important to look at what they follow. And what I mean by that is their companies and or groups. So companies, if you look at someone's companies list, a lot of times it'll be companies in their industry, but sometimes you'll find unique outliers that are pretty common across different executives. A lot of people follow companies like TED conferences. So that can be a great time to send them a book on how to give a presentation like a TED Talk speaker, right? Still seems super personalized. Or some people follow the Harvard Business Review, right? So you can send them the Harvard Business Review every year comes out with like top 10 management practices from 2022, right? So you can send them that HBR book, which again still seems really personalized, even though, if I'm honest, it really isn't quite as personalized as I might have liked to have make it. So I could go in depth more, but it's really the gold, silver, bronze tier. And what I want to convey is that there is always a level of personalization you can give to gifts. And I would argue that making that effort can be particularly impactful and resonate with your prospects.
I love that advice. And why do you think that gifting works as a strategy for opening doors?
Yeah, why gifting works as a strategy, I could probably go in like 30 different directions, but what I think is because it shows, number one, that you've done research on your prospect, so you know at least something about them. And then above and beyond that, I do think that it stands out from a lot of the other outreach people get. A simple question to ask yourself is, and this can be a rhetorical question for anyone listening, what percentage of emails that you get do you open in your inbox? I can say for myself, I have tens of thousands of unread emails in my personal inbox, and I still have single thousands of unread emails in my work inbox. Now, I open and have filters for the important stuff. But my point is, you might have you may have written the best email in the world, but if there's no compelling event around it, people may never see it. However, what percentage of packages that arrive at your door do you open? I would argue most people are 100%, or if not, they're pretty darn close. So to me, that in and of itself explains why gifts are so effective, because they break through the noise. And especially with great, companies like Sendoso, you can add in a little note that allows your prospects to begin to connect the dots for, oh, Caspian sent me this gift. Okay, Caspian, Gong, when they get that follow-up email, get that LinkedIn request, get that phone call, they know it was me that sent them that gift. So that's why I think gifting is so impactful. But I do think the thoughtfulness around the gift helps to make it even more effective.
I love this. And when you would send books, right? Because that was like the main strategy that you utilized throughout your SDR career at Gong. So when you would send these books, were you doing it on LinkedIn, on email, both? What did that messaging look like?
Great question. So to clarify, talking about the follow-up, like how would I follow up on all of these? Yeah. So I do think the follow-up process to gifts is important. And I would normally adopt like a three-step initial process, because you can always put people in a sequence, right? Like that option is always available to you. But for me, step number one is the actual sending of the gift. The gift needs to land before the follow-up can happen. I call that out because a question I sometimes get is, at what point in your prospecting process do you send a gift? Is this someone that you've already emailed, that you've already called? I've tried things 1,000 different ways. I will say, in my experience, it behooved me to lead with my most creative touch first. So for me, the gift sending was number one without anything else. Like it was kind of it might sound odd, but it was like naked outreach. There was nothing beyond that gift that they first got. The day after the gift lands, I would send them a follow-up email with the subject line, did you get the whatever the book was? Like, did you get the Simon Sinek book? I'm sure Lavender would rate that subject line very poorly. However, it was very effective. It is short. It's short and it's clear, right? And I cannot tell you how many meetings I set from instances where maybe I didn't have the right address, but people were still so intrigued by that subject line that then they opened the email. And of course, in the follow-up email, you should treat it, you should still treat it like a well-researched prospecting email. This is not a transactional relationship of, I send you a book, you give me a meeting. It is, the gift is used to break through the noise. So I would say something along the lines of, hey, Katie, USPS mentioned they delivered your gift yesterday. Did it arrive? Right? Like really simple thing mentioning, like, again, that I was the one that sent them the gift. Then having some research around why they should care, right? So if they are a sales leader and there's been growth in their company, I'm going to take a guess that they're probably focused on upskilling those new hires as quickly as possible, right? So I am trying to answer the question for them. Why should I care, right? Like, okay, I got this book, but why are you even reaching out, right? That's my very next point, is to give them that context. Step number three is your value prop. I've called out a problem that I think they're focused on. Now it's time for me to explain how my company solves for that problem, right? So I want my prospect to be able to connect the dots very readily. Like, I sent them the gift. This is why I sent it to them, right? They follow Simon Sinek or whatever the case may be. Why I reached out to them specifically was because of growth in their sales department and their VP of sales. Now I'm explaining why my company can solve for that problem they're experiencing. And then finally, I would be a bit bold with my call to actions. I would say, like, would it be completely out of the question to connect for 15 minutes later this week to unpack this a bit more? I know that can be contentious. I know sometimes people like to have very soft calls to action, and I respect that. For me, I was always of the opinion that if I have truly done my best to make this gift relevant to them and impactful and have this well-written email, why wouldn't I shoot for the moon, right? And often I would get several meetings just from that initial email, right? They open and respond to it, say, yes, love it, like, let's meet tomorrow. The other follow-ups are, I would still argue, equally as important because not everyone manages their inbox super well. So right after that email goes out, literally the very next moment, I go to their LinkedIn profile, I add them on LinkedIn, and in the connection request, I say very bluntly, with no call to action, but again, just helping them connect the dots, prospect first name. So if I was prospecting you, like Katie hyphen, hope you're enjoying the Simon Sinek book, smiley face, Caspian, so that they again understand it was me that sent them that specific book. And while I will say I don't normally like including messages in connection requests, like I think you better have a damn good reason for why you're putting in a note for a connection request. I think if you send a gift, that's a damn good reason, right? And
Agree.
right in that situation, if they accept your connection request, like they know who you are. That they understand. They don't have to accept the connection, right? Like with an email, yeah, they open it, but they might not truly know who you are when they open it. If they choose to accept it, like that, to me, always implied that they potentially are open. And like once you're connected on LinkedIn, you can send them a video, you can get really creative. But the last step, let's say they don't open your email, let's say they don't accept your LinkedIn request. You got to go for the phone, right? That is still the quickest way to get a meeting. So I would still call, but I would change my opener if they did actually pick up. And I would mention, hey, Katie, it's Caspian calling from Gong. If you're calling on a recorded line, of course, call that out. But right after I mention that, sent you that Simon Sinek book. Hope I'm not catching you at the worst time humanly possible. Right in the first like 5 seconds, it's me, and I cannot tell you how many people told me, "Oh, Caspian, love that book. I can't talk now, but let's set up time for later this week." Right? And of course, if you need to do qualification, if you don't know anything about that prospect or their company, do the relevant qualification and discovery. I tried to do that on the front end, and that's why I leverage this really omni-channel approach. But I cannot tell you how many people would, without me doing any pitching, would say yes. Let's talk later this week. So for me, gifting truly, truly, truly was the end all be all. Like during my SDR tenure, it was everything I was about.
And what's so interesting about your process is that it's at the beginning of your cold outreach. And as you called it, your naked outreach, right? And
Yeah.
I think that that's so interesting because a lot of the personas that you were going after were these ATL personas, right? These directors, VPs, C-suite, right? And I think a major debate that people are trying to argue is that when you're gifting to an ATL persona, it needs to be expensive. But you saw so much success with this low value book send. And it was so successful because of the personalization behind it. And I mean, you were an overachieving SDR. You weren't just hitting your quota, you were over exceeding. I think I saw that one month you were over 130%. Is that correct?
Mhm. Yeah, no, that was actually my last quarter. I got like 100. I I feel bad like talking about like my I was very successful during my time as an SDR, but yeah, I had like 130, 167. I feel like kind of braggadocious mentioning it, but yes, it was effective. It was effective. That's all I can say.
That's awesome. Well, that's so cool. I think it just speaks to, sales is kind of a give and take, right? And I think something that's so important that's being called out here in this conversation is that you're giving attention. You're letting that
Yeah.
prospect know that you're not just another dollar sign in my revenue stream, right? I care about you as a person and what you're interested in and how eventually I could potentially help you in the sales process. And I think that thoughtfulness really translated obviously for you to success, but also just building genuine relationships with your prospects. So I really appreciate you breaking this down for us. I think that this advice is going to be super helpful for anyone that's trying to implement gifting and as part of their strategy, but also anyone that's just curious about gifting in business. So thank you for your time, Caspian. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, Katie. Well, I'm a huge fan of Sendoso, huge fan of gifting. So truly, you all are the ones that are doing the great work.